Michelle Kay has been in front of computers for 25 years, and most of that time as a computer trainer and tech expert. She is here with us on the podcast today to help us untangle our tech nightmares and help us figure out what tech we need in our business, how to use it, and how to get more efficient, because that's what it's there for, right? Hi, Michelle. Thanks for being with us today.
It's lovely to be here. And yeah, you're absolutely right. Tech is supposed to make life easier, but I think many people think the exact opposite. You spend hours and hours behind a computer, a screen, or whatever, and it just gives you nightmares. So hopefully today I'm gonna help dispel some myths and actually, maybe help some people out, basically.
Yeah, so many of us get stuck in the tech part, or we don't even get started because we're overwhelmed by the tech that we think is going to be complicated. So I
Yeah.
love that we're talking about this today, and we're going to take some of the scaries out of the tools for our businesses. So I saw in your in your intro, you've been on computers for 25 years. So I'm interested what your first computer was like, because mine was a Commodore 64 that we bought it on a clearance sale. It was a final sale. And when we finally tried to use it, it didn't work. So I don't know if that was actually my first computer because I never got to use it. But I guess that would have been more than 25 years ago. I'm dating myself now. But
Um,
what was it like?
Fortunately, I know about the Commodores. I had friends in university who had them, but I didn't. So my first real computer that was mine, and I used it, was actually an Amstrad PCW 9512. And it's amazing that I can remember those details.
I love that
It,
you can remember that.
it was a word processor. So it was, if I wanted italic, I actually had to take the daisy wheel out of the printer and put the italic one in. So funny enough, I didn't print in italic very often. And when you switched it off, the memory cleared. So it was all like, it was old.
Kids
It was
today will
lovely.
never understand the struggles, right?
I know. I know.
I'm
But
playing the Oregon Trail. That was what we did at school.
um,
We learned computers. We played the Oregon.
uh, I mean, the thing that was hilarious is your phone is X times. I mean, we're not talking like 2 or 3 times. We're talking like 10, 50 times more powerful than the computer that sent people to the moon.
How did you get into computer training? And then how did you transition to what you're doing now, which is still kind of computer training, but
Yeah. It was one of those really weird things. Apparently in sort of trainers, I'm a bit unique because it's the only career I actually wanted. Every other trainer you ever talked to, they always had a major a career, and then they became a trainer. I was good at computers because I did the business studies, and that was the first computer. I actually appeared to be quite good at them. I got them, and the teacher liked me, so I was able to use them at lunchtime and everything. So that was cool. And I just continued my formal education with computers. And then when I went to college, I was the first person who needed to use a particular piece of software. The lecturer or the tutor basically said, see that folder over there, and pointed. Yeah, that's your instructions. So being the first person, basically I had to learn it, and then everybody else asked me questions. And I was always going to be sort of a teacher, but it was always going to be computers. And somewhere at college, I heard finally this phrase trainer. I didn't want to teach little kids. I wanted to teach at least people who I could have conversations with. And then this phrase trainer came up, and it was for adults. And it just kind of clicked: computers trainer, IT trainer. That's the career choice, and that's what I've done for 25 odd years. I've been usually a corporate trainer, so I've always been in the corporate industry, but I thought it's really nice training corporates. It's a job, but I'm only training this group of people. With everything that's happening and everything that had happened, I really want to be able to share my knowledge. It's quite a bank of information at this time. So I made the somewhat scary decision to actually go more online. Not that I haven't been online, obviously, but to actually see if I could help more people. And that's where I am today.
that's amazing. Well, lucky for us. So we're going to talk about tech, but tech is a pretty broad topic these days. I mean, just about everything has some
It is,
elements of
isn't
tech
it?
to it now. So when we're talking tech for our conversation today, we're talking about which types of programs.
Well, first off, tech, as you said, tech is huge. So it can be anything from the hardware to the software and all the different types of things. But obviously, for your particular audience, it's about creating a business, creating, shall I say, an empire, or starting your empire. Let's use
Yes, you
the
can.
right phrasing. And it's kind of boils down to, well, what do you actually need? I mean, you'll see that there are so many people who say you need this, 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 and this. And obviously they've all got like affiliate links. So it's like, well, you need this program because you click on my affiliate link and I will earn a little bit of money. And that's great if you know. If you don't, then that's a different topic. So I did have a good think, and I boiled it down to 7 or 8 things. So you have got your idea. Hopefully you've listened to all the other podcasts here, and so you've got a pretty good plan of what you want to do. But then you've got to think about, well, how are you going to make that happen? So office suite and storage, you're going to be creating things, aren't you? Whether that is stuff that you'll send out, maybe like a lead magnet idea of documents. Maybe you've got forms that you want people to do. Maybe you have got documents and things that is part of your pay program. You've got to create something and you've got to put it somewhere. So that's your office suite, so big wide thing, and storage.
Yeah, and right from the beginning, this is every time I do something, I think, why didn't I do this right from the beginning? Is getting your stuff off of your own computer and onto a cloud base, something, some kind of storage where it can be organized and where it can be shared. Because at some point, it's going to be more than just you. And this happens to be every time I start a business about a year in, I go, why did I do this all on my own computer? This is stupid. So
The other
that's a
thing to
great one.
Yeah, the other thing to think about is what happens if your computer goes flat.
Yes.
You need a copy.
I try not to think about that.
I found out the hard way about emails, but that's a completely different story. Talking of emails, you need to be able to send emails. You are going to have, hopefully, your empire is going to be made up of lots and lots of customers. Obviously, they all want to give you money. How do you communicate with them? So as a general rule, email is a big thing. You will hear an awful lot of people talking about email service providers. If you want to sound a little techie, it's ESP. No, it doesn't necessarily mean extrasensory perception. So how are you going to communicate with people? Obviously, you've got a lot of different things in there, but email is probably one of the big ones. When people say, well, how can I find out more information about you? You've got to have some place to send them. So that most people think websites, it's not the only option, but some place to send people to go and find out more about you. Communications, while we've mentioned email, well, how else? Are you, for example, a coach or somebody providing services? Well, how are you going to communicate with people? You know, do you use something like Zoom or one of the other options? You're going to take notes. Now, whether this is just to get the ideas out of your head or whether it's notes on your clients, you've got to have somewhere to put that. Products. Well, if you're creating products, how are you going to create them? Now, maybe that's part of the office suite. Maybe it isn't. I don't know all the different products that you could create. But again, how are you going to do this? And then lastly, but also one of the really important bits is how are they going to pay you? How do you take payment? So that for me, I think was the key things. You've got other things around it, but that's what I came up with as the main list. Now, one key important thing that I'd like your listeners to really grasp hold of is you don't have to have everything immediately. This is all about what does your business, your specific business need? And more importantly, what can your specific business afford? You don't have to have the most expensive that does everything today. This is always something for tomorrow. You need the basics. And let's be honest, with all the options available, there's an awful lot of people and companies that offer you trials of free options. Try things out. Find out what's going to work for you. So that's a really big thing is you don't need the most expensive, the biggest, the best, what everybody is trying to tell you or sell you now. But have ideas about, okay, well, when I earn this, or when I get to this level, upgrade, take it from there.
That's one of the great things too about so many of these online platforms is that they do have generally a free or really inexpensive starter level.
Yeah,
So
they do.
so let's talk through these just one by one. And if you can kind of give us your your best bits of advice or tips or just thoughts on each of these that you think we should have in mind as we move forward.
Sure. So we'll start at the beginning. Office. Okay, remember I'm corporate, or I have been corporate, so I am amazing at Microsoft. I will put this out there now. No, they don't pay me to say that, but it's true. Now, everybody thinks when it comes to Microsoft 365, everybody thinks it's really expensive. No. So first off, you can get a free version. It doesn't have all the bells and whistles, but you can get it free. You create a free Microsoft account, and they will give you some storage space with that, and they will give you the basic software. So that equals Word, Excel, PowerPoint, Outlook for your email, so that's Outlook Online, and OneNote, which is my personal favorite program of the suite. You get storage space, and that is free. Obviously, you don't get quite as much. You can pay extra for more storage if you want. And of course, if you then realize that you are using it a lot and you want more facilities, you can choose to go the purchase route. So you can go through, Office. You can buy, for example, M365. And don't forget, if you're using it for your personal use, if there is just one of you, you don't have to go through a Microsoft Business license. You can just go through Microsoft Personal. And of course, the one that everybody is talking about is Google. Because Google is free. Yes, there is a paid version of Google. When you get to your empire level, you might want to go the paid version. And at the end of the day, for me personally, it's what are you most comfortable with? As I said, I love Microsoft, and I am very, very comfortable with it now. I am learning Google because I'm getting questions on it. It's completely personal preference. If you're more used to Microsoft, go for their free version. If you're not really, or you want to try or change and have a go, let's be honest, I've got both. It's what do you need? You might find that Google, because it's got the forms built in, actually might be better for you. Or you can mix and match. You can use Microsoft Word Online, and you can use Google Forms. They will work together. And if you do have both, you've also got twice the storage space.
I use Outlook for my emails. I love Outlook for my emails, but I use the Google Drive. I love the Google Forms. And I only recently started using them, but just to be able to send out a survey and have that information dumped right into your drive. And
Yeah.
there's so many really cool things you can do on there for free as far as the forms and the sheets go.
Either of those will always give you storage. Both of them will let you pay to get more storage. And then you've got other things which are only storage. So you've got things like Dropbox. If you like Apple, they have iCloud. Realistically, it's going to be Microsoft or Google in terms of your Office suite and your main storage.
Okay.
So that's option number one. Moving on, email. Absolutely. You've got so many different email providers. Choose whichever one you want. However, I learned this a little bit the hard way. I've been using my personal email account for years, but I was looking around and I was trying to sign up for a few bits, and they weren't letting me use my email account because it wasn't a business version. So it wasn't, Michelle K training or anything. And they said, well, basically you're not a business, so you can't join us. Depending on what you're doing, this could be an issue.
So was it the domain that was attached to
Yeah.
your personal email that it was
Yeah.
just like a Gmail or a whatever, so that they were
Yeah.
tagging it as a personal email? Okay. I know sometimes
Absolutely.
I'll run into, if you're trying to use an email that's like an info at She Corporated or something like that, certain places won't let me use that because they want your actual email, not
Yeah.
a general
Everyone.
email box. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, and when we're
So-
talking about email
Mhm.
here, as far as the email service providers, we're not really talking about like your Outlook or your Gmail. When we're talking about these, we're talking about platforms where you can run your email marketing from, which you do not want to do from your personal email account, because that would drive
Yeah.
you crazy.
So it will. So at the very least, you want an email address that is business. Now, even if that's like Michelle K at Gmail, but what you do need is an email list. People are going to put their hands up and say, I want your information. What are you going to do? Where are you going to store them? A lot of people will be talking about this email platform, email service provider. This is a company where you basically can store all the email addresses. So that's your email and your name. You can also add things like tags. So you can say, oh, they're interested in this, or they're interested in that. They want my blog, they want my podcast. So they help you do that. One of the things that is for me so fundamentally important is that you can schedule your emails. You don't have to stand there or sit there and do that every time. Now, you will want an ESP. However, you may not need it now. One of the things that I am sorry I didn't start doing years ago was starting to build my email list. If you haven't started yesterday, the best day to start it is going to be today, as so many people have said. What do you do with your email list? Well, if you're not ready for an ESP yet, use your spreadsheet. You've chosen your Office suite. Both of them have a spreadsheet. Just put it in there. You want name, separate it out so it's first name and surname, and you want their email account. If you've got different options, so for example, maybe you've got different lead magnets, so different interests, you want to just write down what is it that they picked, where did you find them? All of this, when you get to that point of an ESP, you can import it in. So you don't have to manually type it, thankfully, because of course you're going to be wildly popular and you're going to have hundreds of names, but you can do that. Now, one of the really cool things is that your ESPs, so many of them, not all of them, but so many of them do offer a free trial. So your first 500 or 1,000 emails are free. So as you're starting, you can start to build that up. Find the one that you're comfortable with, because they're all slightly different. So going forward, what you want is you want to be able to automate things, because you're going to be so busy dealing with your empire. You don't want to have to sit there and manually write and send an email when you need it. So you want automation, which is I want to set it up and pre-schedule it. And at some point, you're going to want the automation where when somebody, for example, actually says, right, I'd like to download your lead magnet, which is the thing that most people use, that actually it starts what's called a welcome sequence. So you get, here's the link to download it, and then automatically it starts sending emails out.
Yeah, and I think the other thing too, that there's such a big benefit when you're using the email service providers, especially once you start really actively trying to grow your marketing and reach your people, is the analytics that you just can't get any other way. And you want to make sure when I'm looking at the different platforms is, do they have, because some, not all of them do have great analytics, but you
Yeah.
can see, who opened it, who clicked it, what
Yeah.
did they click? And you can split test. The most important thing on your email is your subject line, because if that doesn't get them to
Yeah.
open it, nothing else in your email matters because they're not going to read it, right? So
Yeah,
you can do your split
absolutely.
testing, and you can send out one email and you can test both subject lines if you've got an email service provider. So I think once you're actively trying to really build your company and build your marketing, there's so much information you can get from those analytics that will help you grow faster.
Absolutely. And you need to check, most of that sort of stuff is part of the paid account. So again, compare the options. What is it going to give you for what price? So, a lot of things to think about. Remember, you don't have to buy everything today. You don't even have to do it tomorrow, but at some point you will. Okay. Websites and alternatives. So you've got this person pounding on your virtual door. I want information. Where can I go to find more? Most of the time we're talking about a website. Now, remember, this doesn't have to be the most singingy, dancingy website on the planet. It doesn't have to be huge. It can literally be one page. That's enough. You've got to design it and build it, and then you've got to keep putting content into it. But you've got a number of other alternatives, which are like one-page websites, lead pages, a whole bunch of different options where you just need basically a page that you can send people to and collect their email address. That's what you want. Google has a facility called Google Sites, and it is part of your free Google account, and it will give you that first thing. And of course, it's Google and it'll come in. But if you're ready to move that extra step up, then you can go for a website. There are so many to choose from. I have gone WordPress. And remember, there are two WordPresses. There's WordPress.com and there's WordPress.org. WordPress.com is going to be, for example, your free blog. So it's not, you can do it as a website. WordPress.org is the one that's going to be, you need to create it, design it, and play around, or pay somebody else to play around with all the tech. So just to be a bit clearer, because WordPress is a little bit confusing with the two sides.
And there's so many great platforms too now that are user friendly. You do not have to be a tech expert
No.
to build on so many of these platforms. I've built my own sites on Shopify. I built my own sites on GoDaddy. They're simple. There's usually no cost. I mean, because you're building it yourself, it's just the monthly fee, right, for
Yes.
hosting it. But it's a really inexpensive way to, it's also a great way, especially for your first site, to figure out what you want. Because if you dive right in to your first site with a designer, it's honestly, it's going to take you a lot longer than you thought it was because you don't really know what you want until you really dive into it, you start having the conversations with the designer and it's like, oh, I don't know, I haven't thought about that. So if you do the first version yourself, I think it's a great exercise in really understanding what you want and what you need as well.
I have a great story about that. Back in the late 90s, one of my first training roles, I trained HTML. So that's the language that all websites are built on. And I trained, it was a Microsoft front page. And when last year I decided, okay, let's go for it, I created what I knew. And it's like, oh my God, it's so 90s. It was just so 90s. It didn't look anything like it does today. I then actually took the plunge. I found a coach who would help me actually design it properly. I designed it based on some templates and I realized that, oh my God, this is not me. It was a technology template, but it wasn't me. I finally got my head around what to do because, as you said, the foundations are so important. And actually, if you go to my website, you'll see what it currently looks like, which fortunately looks nothing like it did.
It's a process, right? It's a
It
learning
is.
process.
Absolutely. So I'm on version number 3 and I am much happier. How many muches can I put in? So much happier about what I did. So it is, as people say, done is better than perfect. You just need to do it.
And you're going to change it. Our sites,
Absolutely.
I change them every few weeks. I think of something I want to add, something I want to take away, something I want to change. So that's the that's the other benefit to having done
Yeah.
it yourself is that you have full
Control.
capability. You can change it
Yeah.
anytime you want to. You can update it because you did it. So
Yeah.
there's no shame in building it yourself. You do not need if you need a big site, if you have some
Mhm.
strange functionality that you need on your site that isn't available in templates, every business is different, but don't feel like you have to, get a big designed multi-page site if that's not your business
No,
and that's
yeah,
not your budget.
absolutely. And I will say for those people who are, a few steps ahead, I would highly recommend make sure you've played around with your site. Even if it ends up that you're going to get somebody else to do it, you want to have played around with it because then you have a basic understanding. If you say, it needs to be XYZ, all singing and all dancing, and you have no idea how they did it, if you don't continue with them, how do you make changes? So just again, sort of bear that in mind. So let's move on. Communications. There are so many. So we're going to take email out of that list because that's a whole big thing by itself, and we've already mentioned a few bits. But are you, for example, a coach? How are you going to actually coach them? If you're in a specific area, is it face to face? Probably not quite so much for most of us these days. So how do you do that? We've got things like Zoom. Now, I personally do like Zoom. It has a free version. However, don't forget it's got limitations. Limitations don't have to be bad. If you want to be able to have conversations with people, which is short and sweet, groups of people, well, don't forget the free version is a limit to 40 minutes. It's only going to be 40 minutes and it lets you record it. You know, then you can actually go to a paid version if you need that. And then you've got other things. So you do have Google has its own options as well. You need to have a play. What's going to suit you? What's going to suit how you're going to work? Do you want other things like, so we've got things like Slack. So you've got instant messaging. You can invite people in. Are you going to have groups that people go to? Do you want to use things like Facebook Messenger or WhatsApp? A lot of the stuff is free. So Slack is free to a certain point. Slack's limitation is how many messages go backwards and forwards. I think it's about 10,000. Now, when it's you and maybe a few other people, that's going to take a little while to get to, unless you're really busy and love chatting with each other. Again, try different ones out and see what's going to work for you. But you've got all of those. You can always change things. But remember, when you're starting to send links out, you want to change them as little as possible. Now, this is where my favorite product comes in because you have, I'm sure, millions of ideas in your head. millions and millions. And maybe your memory is amazing. And I know mine is amazing for programs and for computer software, for TV programs and some music as well, and a few books. But everything else, which is an awful lot, if I don't write it down, I'm going to lose it. Again, you have part of Microsoft Office gives you OneNote, my personal favorite.
I'm going to admit now I've never used it. So I'm interested in how I should be using it because I have a terrible memory.
I love it, really works for me. I'm not going to go into any depth. If you want depth on that, we can have another podcast because I can literally speak about that for hours. Hours. You do have Google Keep, which is obviously Google's version, which is very post-it note orientated. So you create lots of post-it notes and it has some advantages, but I want a notebook. I want a digital notebook, and that's OneNote for me. Now, don't forget, you are using a Windows computer or a Mac. Funny enough, they've both got notes built in. They're not amazing, but they've got it, so you don't have to pay for it. If you have got a phone, there's probably a notes facility there. The only thing I would say about those types of notes is you put your ideas and they're great for in the moment. You know, you're out walking, you're out shopping, idea pops, and you think, write it down. The phone is amazing to do that. And the notes section in there, but how do you pull that out? What are you going to do? Things like Google Keep and Microsoft OneNote both have a search facility, which is the best thing in the world because you think, didn't I write something about that? And you want to go search for it. And that's really where it is. So you want something that's searchable. So yeah, by all means, think about all of that. You've then got the other side of the notes, which is, you know, for your clients, you're going to have notes. Where are you going to store those? How are you going to store those? All of those types of ideas.
Okay, perfect.
Notes, I think, is actually you might not think about it, but it's actually quite a big thing.
I use the one on my phone all the time for sure. I use it for like my shopping lists and then sometimes I'll write something and like email the note to myself so that I
Yeah,
don't forget because otherwise I'll just forget that I put it on my phone. But if it's in my
yeah.
inbox, then I'll see it. But I have never tried the Microsoft, so I'm going to look at it now because I probably need that.
My favorite. Don't forget, it is part of the free version. So personally, I absolutely adore the desktop version, but to get that, you do have to have the paid account. But there is the free version, does include the online version of it, so it doesn't have to cost then. Moving onwards, products. So, you know, you're going to have a product. How are you going to create that? What is it? Is it a physical thing? How are you going to do that? I am not great on the physical side. I'm great at the digital side because that's where my business is. So again, it's, well, what software do you need to create that? Do you need something specific? Yes, your Office suite can create things to a degree, and it may be that that's all you need, but do think about for your specific stuff, what is it that you need to do?
So, like, if it's a digital product, maybe it's Canva that you need, or maybe it's Loom to do screen recording. Or you're right, maybe you need some kind of drafting program
Yeah,
for whatever it is that you're doing.
ebooks,
Yeah,
or yeah, if you're doing a
yeah.
book. But yeah, again, think about that. Will your Office suite, whichever one it is, will that do for now? The answer may very well be yes. If the answer's no, then obviously you need to go and look for that. But it could be it'll do for now, and then let's improve and get a better piece of software later. So again, and of course, if you're talking about physical products, then that's a whole nother thing to do, and that's a whole thing that you've got to think about in terms of your budgets as well. Last but not least, how are you going to take the money? Now, again, you have got a wide stream. The main ones, I mean, you've got things like PayPal. Key thing with PayPal is you have to have a business account to actually accept that money. Just sending things between friends, and if you're talking low numbers, that's probably fine. But if you're having to deal with all the tax and all of the legally stuff, then you need to make sure you're doing this right. So you will need for PayPal, you'll need a business account. Then you've got, you know, well, if it's on your website, for example, you've got a shop on there. How are you going to do this? Now, if you're talking a physical product, then Etsy, Squarespace, some of those big ones will have this already built in. They'll have the options, and that you can use that because they've already designed it to work with their product. If you're talking more of your personal website that you have either designed or created, then you've got to again think about that. So my site, I use Stripe because that's a very popular one. But look at, well, what are they going to charge me? And of course, with digital things, you're talking worldwide. It's not just, the US, the UK, Europe, whatever. You're talking about everybody. So not only is what are they going to charge you, but what are they going to charge you if it's in a different currency? And how much is it going to cost? So let's say, it's $10. Well, I'm in the UK, I deal in pounds. As a general rule, I get better exchange rate for my pounds when I buy US dollars. So if it goes backwards, so from US to UK, it's not such a great rate and I could be losing money. So again, think of all of this and how you're going to do that. And if you're talking about more of a bricks and mortar store, well, are you bricks and mortar and digital? In which case, what you want is something that will do both, which again, there's a lot of things that will do. So I'm pretty certain that things like PayPal have little card readers that you can have them on your website, but you can also have a card reader with you. So a few things to think about. That's probably the one that is more a little bit of research to find out what's going to work for you, and don't spend your money there because you want to spend the money to realistically make the money.
And it's well worth slowing down on that step and taking some time to really compare them, because they can
Yeah.
get quite complicated on how they charge you the fees. They have some of them will have a monthly flat fee, and they'll have
Yeah.
like lower per transaction rates. Some of them will have a per transaction amount
Percentage.
plus a
Yeah.
percentage, and some will just have the percentage. So it's going to be, what's best is going to be different depending on your business. How large is each transaction? How many transactions are you going to have in a
Mm,
month? How many are going to be international? You want to kind of think all of that through and then really work out the numbers. So
yeah.
theoretically, what one's going to cost compared to another. And it can be quite surprising.
Yeah.
Yeah, we use Stripe as well for a couple of our businesses. It works quite well. I know there's also little square readers that you can use on a
Mhm.
mobile phone, but there's so many ways to do it depending on what you're doing and how much your thing costs as well.
Yeah.
Lovely. So that's a lot. That's a
Of
lot.
course.
But it's all stuff you need to think through. So I really appreciate this, because usually when people are talking about different tech programs, they're often, you said, they're affiliates for one or the other. So it's often hard to get really unbiased opinions or advice on this. So this is all, neither Michelle nor I are paid by any of these companies to talk about these things. So this is all just our personal opinions on things, as well as Michelle's, obviously, her experience and expertise in these fields as far as what you want to look for. Now, one thing I want to tackle before we go, because you have been in the corporate world for a long time, you're also an entrepreneur, and we have a lot of women in our community that are just getting started on their business journey. So what is your best piece of advice? And it could be tech related, it could be non-tech related, but your best piece of advice for women founders, women starting their business empire?
I have already mentioned it, but I will mention it again because this is so worth saying. Start building your email list. That is the one thing. If I knew what I was doing realistically, I would have started this years ago, because even if it's just friends and family, you're going to need to market to people because they're not going to spend money with you if they don't know you exist. So build that email list. As I said, free. Do it on your spreadsheet. You're going to have it with one of your suites, and then you can build up to your ESP and make it amazing. But start building that. If you haven't already done it, start doing it today. Simple as that.
That's such a great piece of advice. And I think we stop ourselves because we think, well, we're not completely ready yet. But you don't have to be completely ready to start building your audience. You don't even have to know exactly what you're selling to start
Yeah.
building your audience. You just need to know who you're targeting and who your audience is going to be, and just start building that relationship.
Start. Just
Yeah,
start.
just
You
start.
know,
No.
at the end of the day, if you pivot and it was one thing and it's now something else, don't worry. The people that you've already spoken to might be interested in the pivot, they might not be. And if people are not interested, you say thank you very much, and you go and find the people who are. People are unsubscribing occasionally from my list, and I'm thinking, thank you, obviously we weren't right. So thank you for taking the opportunity to let me know that we weren't right. And you have to think, no, oh my God, people are unsubscribing. I've gone down. I'm losing people. No.
You know what? It's all perspective, because I think we all get that pang of, well, what did I say? Well, why didn't they want to hear me? And but in the end of the day, I would much rather have them unsubscribe than just never open my emails. They're doing me a favor by
Yeah.
unsubscribing, because they're helping my open rates,
Yeah.
right? The more times it goes to their inbox and they just don't bother opening it, the worse my deliverability gets on my
Yeah.
emails. So please unsubscribe if you don't want my emails. You're helping me.
Yeah. I
Appreciate
remember it. Yeah, and remember when you've got that lead magnet and you're asking people to give you their email address, there is gonna be an awful lot of people who are getting that because it's free,
Yeah.
and that's the only reason they've got it. So, yeah, absolutely, as you said, they are helping you, and say thank you. I mean, m quietly to yourself maybe, not necessarily to them in an email because they're not
Yeah,
gonna open
right
it,
away.
but yeah.
Well, so Michelle has an amazing tech checklist for us. She's been gracious enough to share with us, and we've got the link for it in the show notes for you. So if you have a look at the show notes, if you're on a platform where you can't see the show notes, you can always go over to the podcast website, which is onestepempire.com. And the show notes and the links and all the other episodes, all the good stuff is there. So it's onestepempire.com. That's the podcast website. So I just want to say thank you. Thank you so much for being with us today, Michelle, and tackling this topic. We really appreciate having you here.
Very welcome. I hope it helps people because, as you said, there is so much confusion about what you need and what you should buy, and it's very easy to spend money and realize that that was the wrong thing. So, again, people just try things out. If there is a free version, go for that first. Never just dive in because you're going to have a budget. You want to use the budget the best way you can.
Agreed. Thank you so much, Michelle.